Happy Easter and welcome. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. I recognize that many of you are connecting with church for the first time in a while, and we are just thrilled about that. Even in the best of times, Easter for us is a little bit out of the ordinary. And whether you're in person or online, welcome. This past year in a million ways has been out of the ordinary for us, hasn't it? You and I could list many, many different ways that our normal routines have been turned upside down this past year. One normal routine for me that got out of whack was my workout routine. Pre-COVID, I would go to the gym regularly and do a mix of weightlifting and cardio. Well, when COVID first hit, the gym shut down, and I was stuck at home. And at that time, I decided to get back into running. So I went out running on some of the local hiking trails here in the Poconos every day, feeling good. But then I started to develop a pain in my right leg, like sciatica. So I had to stop, but the pain didn't go away. Turns out it was something called a piriformis injury, something I never heard of. And for about 2 months, while I was stuck at home doing push-ups and pull-ups, just trying to stay in shape, I could barely walk or even lie down because I had this leg pain. I know what you're thinking. That's what happens when you get old, Father. Anyway, the gym then opened up, and when I started to go back to the gym and do barbell squats, the pain thankfully went away. Well then, a few months later, I know I'm a bit crazy and intense, I was getting back into using weights, and one day after a tough workout doing bench presses, my left shoulder was in pain. And after 2 or 3 months, that's still in pain even now a little bit. So my point is, besides just whining about getting old, is that I had an ordinary routine. I got out of that routine, and pain happened. Ordinary is defined as of no special quality or interest, unexceptional. There are times for us when we actually like ordinary. And there are other times when we don't. Depending on your personality, you may like a certain level of normalcy in your life. That normal routine can give us stability and peace. And part of us likes the ordinary. Most of us have routines that we're just comfortable doing. And even if some of those ordinary, normal practices are not really working well for us, we can keep on doing them out of habit because we're attached to them. On the other hand, there are routines you don't like housework or homework or your daily commute. You dread doing them, and you know you have to do them anyway. And then, if you think about it, there's a third category. There can be whole seasons or periods of our life that become, quote-unquote, ordinary in a way that they were never meant to be. They become ordinary in a way that they shouldn't be. More than just routine or monotonous, they become depressing, even oppressive. Maybe ordinary for you, for example, is that your job has begun to feel like a mistake and it has no future for you. Maybe ordinary for you is that school is boring. You're bored with your subjects. You're bored with your major. You're tired of your friends and the stupid stuff they keep getting into. Maybe ordinary for you is your relationships with your parents, with your siblings. They just feel dysfunctional, maybe even broken. Maybe ordinary for you is the feeling that you're stuck in your marriage. Maybe ordinary, in a bad way, is the way you feel about church and religion, and by extension, God. You know, you believe, sure, but that doesn't really mean anything for you. Sometimes you go through the motions, but not more. Well, if any or all of that is you, we're glad you're here today. Because Easter is a celebration of more, something more than ordinary. You see, when ordinary wasn't working for the world, when the world was caught up in the same old that led nowhere, God stepped in and decided to do something out of the ordinary. He sent His Son. Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and He was a real human being. Jesus lived much of His time on this earth living an ordinary life. But then He came onto the public stage. He taught His first followers how to live like no one ever taught. He had insights into life that people had never heard before. He told stories that challenged people to change their assumptions about God and religion. And He spoke with an authority and acted with a power that nobody had ever seen of or heard of before. People who were nothing like Him liked Him, and they followed Him. You know, there's absolutely no record in the Gospels of anybody anywhere ever being bored by Jesus. It's then ironic and sad, really, that so many people talk about their experience of church as boring. Because the person who is present among us here was anything but boring. People who encountered Jesus found healing and miracles. They were astonished and amazed by Him. And sometimes they were challenged and even angered. But they were never, ever bored. Encountering Jesus was simply a life-changing event. Jesus lived an extraordinary life, and then He did something more extraordinary. He allowed Himself to be beaten and scourged and nailed to a cross. Then 3 days later, He did something that never has happened before or since. He rose from the dead. Easter is about the celebration of the most extraordinary event in history, the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. But even that, as incredible as it is not the only thing. There's even more. We believe that that same power that raised Jesus from the dead is available to us for our living. It's available to you. And if you think about it, that's the most extraordinary gift of all. Well, to help us understand that, we're going to look at the gospel reading we just heard. There are 4 accounts in the Bible about the life of Jesus called the Gospels, each of which have their own unique perspective on the life of Jesus. We call these biblical books the Gospels according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We're going to look at John's perspective of that first Easter morning. John, who is the patron saint of our parish and also an eyewitness. Well, he tells us, on the first day of the week, Mary of Magdala came to the tomb early in the morning, while it was still dark, and saw the stone removed from the tomb. So Jesus died on a Friday afternoon. Saturday was a Sabbath day, which for Jewish people meant they could not do any work from Friday at sundown until Sunday morning. Work, for example, like burying a body. Jesus died late in the afternoon on Friday, so in order to bury Him, 2 of His friends quickly took His body down from the cross, wrapped Him in some linen cloths, and then placed Him in a tomb close by. Because the Sabbath was approaching at dusk, they didn't have enough time for the full traditional burial ritual. In the culture of that time, the custom was to anoint the body with different oils before burial. But on Good Friday, they didn't have enough time. So, another friend of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, goes back to the tomb to do the anointing herself the first chance she gets, which was Sunday morning. Well, that's where we pick up the story. When she gets to the tomb is when the story gets interesting. The tomb was just this little cave with a rock rolled across it. But things are not as she expected. The rock had been rolled completely away. When she looked into the tomb, the body was gone. It was missing. Well, Mary's shocked and distressed. So she runs to find Jesus' closest friends, Peter and John. And when she finds them, she says to them, "They have taken the Lord from the tomb, and we don't know where they put Him." So Mary is concerned and distressed, and she makes this reasonable assumption here that Jesus' body's been stolen, or at least moved somewhere. Peter and John are as concerned and distressed as she is, and so they take off to check out the tomb for themselves. And here's what John tells us happens next. They both ran, but the other disciple, that's John, ran faster than Peter and arrived at the tomb first. He bent down and saw the burial cloths there, but did not go in. So John runs and kind of glances in, and he simply sees that Jesus isn't there, and that some of the cloths from Jesus' body, that Jesus' body had been buried in, were left behind. Well, then Peter arrives. John tells us, when Simon Peter arrived after him, he went into the tomb and saw the burial cloths there, and the cloth that had covered his head, not with the burial cloths, but rolled up in a separate place. So Peter goes a little deeper into the scene and observes it a little more carefully. It'd be like if you come home and go into your office and things are just out of place a little bit or look different, and you start to examine it more closely. So think about it, the scene is a little off. Robbers wouldn't come into the tomb and take the body, then neatly separate the different burial cloths. In fact, if you think about it, robbers would probably steal the cloths and leave the body. Well, the story continues. Then the other disciple, again, this is John, also went in, the one who had arrived at the tomb first, and he saw and believed. So what's expressed here in this story is this kind of deepening insight into what they're looking at. What did they actually see? Did they instantly see Jesus resurrected in all his glory with great big flashes of lightning and thunder and a band and a fog machine and lights and cameras, and then they came to believe? No. First, both Peter and John had just glanced at the scene. Then Peter takes a closer look and begins to think about what the evidence is saying. And then John takes in the whole scene, and he has a deeper insight. It wasn't robbers. The only possible reason the tomb was empty, John concludes, was because Jesus conquered the grave. If you think about it, all they saw were the cloths, a pile of rags. John saw and believed. He saw in this empty tomb in a dark cave, in an ordinary pile of rags, the power of God. He saw in this ordinary scene the power of God. He saw through the ordinary and glimpsed the extraordinary. That's faith. That's Easter. That's what Easter's all about. Easter's about the celebration of the most extraordinary event in history that has power in our ordinary life. It's exactly what we see happens to John himself and Jesus' other friends. If you keep reading their stories in the Bible after Easter, it's quite simple, actually. Ordinary men and women, fishermen and farmers, started living lives that were dramatically transformed. God started using them in bold, courageous, world-changing ways because they chose to live their lives by relying on God's power. The power of Easter can change your life. Let me say that again in case you're not hearing it. The power of Easter can change the ordinary things in your life that were never meant to be ordinary. The ordinary things in your life that shouldn't ever be ordinary. If it's only ordinary in your marriage that you don't talk to one another, if you're at a dead end and there's nothing left to say, the resurrection of Jesus Christ had the power to bring your marriage back from death to life. You know what? If that happens, the world's not going to stop and take notice, but you will. You'll see in that ordinary circumstance the extraordinary power of God. If it's only ordinary for you to fight with your parents all the time, to never really talk and have a calm discussion, never to have a pleasant moment, just fight. The resurrection of Jesus Christ has the power to restore that relationship. Nobody else is going to see that or notice, but you'll see the power of God. If it is only ordinary for you to drink too much or to look at inappropriate stuff on the internet, if it's only ordinary for you to eat too much and use food in an unhealthy way, or to gossip way more than you should, the resurrection of Jesus Christ has power to change your habits and your hang-ups. if it's only ordinary for you to have a hopeless view of your future or your health, the resurrection of Jesus Christ has power to change your view, to change your perspective, to cast hope into your future. If ordinary for you is being alone and lonely and feeling like you're on your own, if ordinary for you is being defined by your mistakes or your past, if ordinary for you is defined by your divorce, the resurrection of Jesus Christ has power to change that definition. The resurrection of Jesus Christ has the power to break your isolation. That same extraordinary power that raised Jesus Christ to life is available to you. God is seeking to pour that power into your life because He loves you and He favors you. All you have to do is put yourself in the right place to receive it. I'm just talking about some ordinary practices like talking to Him in prayer, turning to Him with your questions and your concern, admitting finally that you don't have all the answers and you don't know everything, increasingly honoring Him with your habits and your choices, finding a community of other believers who are going to support and help and encourage you. It's absolutely a choice, and you absolutely have that choice. You can live your life in a way that's only ordinary, that's not really working, and was never meant to be ordinary anyway. Or you can choose to live your life in a way God honors and blesses because you're looking to and relying on His power. Well, you can make that choice or renew that choice this morning, right now. You don't have to, but you can. It's an old custom among Christians to renew the vows of baptism on Easter Sunday. You know, for those of us who grew up Catholic, we don't remember our baptism, and it really wasn't personal anyway. But we can do it for ourselves this morning, renewing the promises of our baptism, receiving a new sprinkling of the baptismal waters to remind us of the faith that we proclaim. The faith that we proclaim that introduces us to a life that's anything but ordinary. Amen.